Good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure listening to Maria, who was my former boss. And Nix, I have to say, you have a powerful story.
Thank you.
I'll start the session with a quote from Scott Anthony, who will be speaking at least, I think, at 2:30 this afternoon. He said, "It's never been easier to start a company than today, but harder to build one. In fact, of all the startups in the world, only 0.07% become successful." Can you imagine how small that is? But yet, the ones that do, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we talk about them like they happen every day, when the truth is, they don't. So Nix, I want to ask you, when you started Xurpas, of course you started with PinoyExchange.com, did you think it was going to succeed? And what did you learn from other startups that would at least ensure that you would survive the market?
I think it's a benefit that we had very scarce resources. I feel there are a lot of startups who are very good at fundraising, but aren't very good at really iterating their business model or really creating something that's very impactful for their customers. And so we had the benefit of spending a lot of time thinking through how do we craft an experience that would give us the broadest audience and at the same time very deep market penetration. And there were several layers that we had to sort of take out. I mean, we have 5% credit card penetration by head count. How can people pay for these products? The average price point for a paid good in any app store is 99 US cents, yet most mobile subscribers who are prepaid only have about 35 US cents in their prepaid wallet. So from a pricing standpoint, how do you solve it? So across every dimension of the customer experience, we had to peel off the barriers for them to adopt our products. And having, I guess, limited resources allowed us to think through how to solve these problems creatively without really throwing money at it.
Now for Maria, in a country of 100 million people, where 80% essentially belong to the DNA market, and the source of news is mostly from television and radio, with number 3 coming from print. It takes a lot of balls to actually start an online news organization and say to yourself, I am going to make sure we earn money and we are profitable. Was that easy?
Yes.
Are you earning money now?
We will be by early next year.
Okay, all
So
right.
if you think about
so
it,
there you
even
go.
that, right?
Yeah, go on.
It used to take CNN, ANC a decade to break even. Now it's escalated. You can break even within 3 to 5 years, which is what most companies aim for who are on the internet.
But how did you do it?
Throwing away the way we used to see the world. You know, I mean, again, imagine, look at how fast technology changes. That cell phone is now live to millions, right? We don't need an outside, an OB van to do that. We don't need 20 people. You have one cell phone and that's how fast it goes. So how do you do it? For us, we started with 12 people, many ex-ABS, and we took what we knew. I meant that in a nice way.
They have mixed reactions. Did you pirate the ABS people? No, I'm kidding. Go on. So ex-ABS.
We took what we knew, right? And then decided that what we knew had to be changed. And the hardest part for the older journalists was getting rid of our old ways of doing things. And then the last part that we did is there were 4 or 5 of us above 40, everyone else was 20-something. Because the digital natives really do think differently.
But then let's face it, you both started a company, you were passionate about it, you liked PinoyExchange.com, probably you liked people communicating with each other, you're essentially a news junkie, but there's no business model to actually make anything online earn. Let's face it, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg earned what? Now he's a super zillionaire, but earned in the last 2 years. It's not immediate. So for people that are watching that want to start a startup and it's online, what is the business model for making sure you make money?
You know, most of these startups can earn today immediately if they turned off or toned down their customer acquisition costs.
Like how?
So most, for example, I mean, Grab Taxi raised $250 million in its last round. Most of that money goes into subsidizing the fares of riders so that they can build the habit, and at the same time giving extra revenues to the drivers of the cabs so that they suggest it to the cab riders to take it. And then they spend on advertising. So if you look at their transaction volume, and if you look at their expenses, once you take out their advertising and their customer acquisition costs, that will immediately be profitable. And that's the same for most of these startups. I bet you even Lazada, if they turned off their customer acquisition costs, instantly profitable because they're already doing upwards of 10 billion pesos in total revenue. I mean, at a certain point, you hit this point where your revenues grow exponentially and your expenses still stay roughly the same. And your cost of goods also goes down because you have the transactions volume.
Okay,
And
Maria.
I'll add costs, right? So if you think about it, and I can say this because this was many years ago already, but when I left ABS, CapEx, our CapEx cost would be $2 million a year, right? When I started Rappler in that same year, it was $150,000. So you shrink your costs, you get rid of unnecessary costs, you start with the right people who are willing to try new things, and you can watch it grow. The last part is, there are two ways you can do a startup. You can do bootstrap, which everybody has read Lean Startup. By the way, for the record, he was the youngest board member, the founding board member of Rappler, so I'm a journalist and I'm transparent. But the last part of that is from Lean Startup, you can also get VC funding so that you can infuse money into the company so you can grow faster. That's what Zuckerberg did, for example. They weren't, Twitter, I think, may not even be making money yet right now, but what they're doing is growing the base so you own the market before you actually begin to charge.
All right. Now, when it comes to news, with television, you're able to measure viewership. For example, ratings in television determine advertisements, ad rates, and how many advertisements a television show gets. But the question is for an online portal like Rappler, or it could be any other online news. How do you know and how do you measure how many people are watching? How do you sell it to an advertiser? Because case in point, just because you press like does not mean you've seen all of the content. So how is it measured?
Everything is measurable on digital. And actually what I would argue is that you can figure out which stories are read, how long it took someone to read it, which other stories they read after that. You can measure anything. So what's happening right now is that I think advertisers are trying to take those same rigorous measurements that are available on digital to television. Right? Because how do we measure? We lived by nighttime ratings, right? And those ratings are set up in set-top boxes. And they're at statistical sampling. They're not reality. So you can argue both ways, but I think what you're seeing is really a shift in the way we see the world because of the scale of the people you can reach.
My last question. In the world today, the term disruptive innovation is on the mouths of every young graduate. But the problem is they want to earn money. It's to make a lot of money. How can disruptive innovation be used for profit and to also change the world?
Well, disruptive innovation just simply means that you're replacing the status quo of how things are done. But really the ultimate disruption is the internet and the smartphone. By 2020, almost everyone in the world will have a supercomputer in their phones. It's called a smartphone, with access to everything known to man. That's called the internet. So that's a platform by which people will start coursing more and more of their lives through versus the traditional way they do things. How people will get their insurance, how people will get a loan, how people will do their grocery, how people will meet other friends, how people will consume their news, how people will get their entertainment such as games. All of that will suddenly be coursed through this device because people's worlds will become much, much larger than their physical space. That's extremely disruptive. And I think the opportunity for every entrepreneur is to think through what new business models can I build given this massive reality that's forthcoming, and that's already here.
So I think for me, I didn't go into it to make money. I wanted to make sure that we're self-sufficient. But last April, I stayed in Aspen for 3 days with really super sharp minds, people who were trying to figure out how technology can jumpstart development. And we can. And just to jump off of what Nick said, your mobile phone right now ends social exclusion, ends political exclusion, it ends financial exclusion, right? Imagine if we can give to every person who owns a mobile phone aid after a disaster, which is now possible. CCT goes through the mobile phones. There are so many things that we can do, and we can use technology to solve age-old problems.
If there's one thing President Aquino can do, since the theme of this year's APEC Economic Leaders Meeting is inclusive growth, what can President Aquino do to genuinely support SMEs?
So Maria will answer first.
You should.
Sige, ako. I love Nix.
No, really for the tech startup community, access to capital is a big sort of game changer. I was talking to a lot of VCs and a lot of the guys in the startup community here. If you don't count Xurpas' IPO last year, the estimated amount of venture capital that went into all of the startups based in the Philippines in 2014 was probably only about $20 million. Very small. But if you look at like one company in Indonesia, Tokopedia, they raised $100 million last year. That was just one company. So there's really a big disparity between the venture capital funding we get in the Philippines versus what other markets that I feel, we're just as attractive as them as a market is getting. And government can be helpful there. And that's a lot of layers. Make it easier for businesses to set up shop. Make it easier for incentives for venture capital to fund startups. And things like those.
Well said,
He's
Maria.
so diplomatic. I'm going to be less diplomatic. I think that we need to get rid of the barriers that stop us from doing business. I just finished a fundraising round. It is so painful. If we were a company that was based in Singapore, it would have cut my work by more than 8 months, right? Having said that, imagine with our antiquated laws and with the lack of our systems, how well we're doing now. Imagine what more we could do. So if I could wave a magic wand, please get out of the way.
All right, Maria, Ressa and Nix Nolledo, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for that illuminating discussion, Ms. Ressa, Mr. Nolledo, and Ms. Davila.